Good morning. The other day we were talking about the expansiveness of God and how important it is that if we're going to reflect a loving God to the world, that we have a better idea of who that God is, that we have a truer image of what God is like. If we have a pinched and negative and miserly image of God, one that is preoccupied with the rules and breaking the rules, then that is the image that we will project to the world. And that is not the true image. We know that by looking at Christ, right? Never a pinched, negative, miserly response to the needs of human beings was ever reflected in the Gospels, in the life of Christ. So how important that is, that we know a God who is authentically what God is like, so that we can project that kind of love to the world. Really, I think we hold God to impossible standards. On one hand, we think of God as this divine Santa or genie in a bottle that will give us whatever we ask for. And on the other hand, we're sure that God can't be any more generous than we are. And if we are withholding mercy and forgiveness, that's for sure what God would do, because God is a righteous God, correct? No. Really and truly, God is a generous and loving God. And if we look at the life of Christ, we see that. So there's a very surprising story in the Gospels, one where a woman is caught in the very act of adultery. Now, right there, that sets you up, right? Caught in the act, where they were lying in wait for her. It was a setup, most likely, because they wanted to prove a point and to see how much like God, or their idea of God, Jesus was. So let's really put it in his face. So they throw her into the dirt in front of him as he sits in a little plaza with people around. And there in the dirt, they put up their argument, right? She's been caught in the act. The act is against the law. And so we have stones, because that's the result of the law, right? The punishment or penalty is being stoned to death. So Jesus looks at them and looks at the woman and says, all right, if that's the way you want to play it, he says in his mind, okay, the first one without sin, the first one who's never done anything that they were caught at doing or intentionally did something they knew was wrong, can throw the first stone. So he's taking a risk here. But he's betting that as men of the law, they would not deny the fact that they too have broken the law. But they are surprised by the response of Jesus. They're not pleased at all. They're grumbling and angry. And so the story goes, they turn and walk away. There's so many lessons here for us. The fact that God can surprise us, that when we live outside the lines and even know what we're doing is wrong and against the law, that the compassion of God reaches out. Did Jesus, what was going on in Jesus' mind? Did Jesus think of his own mother, who was very close to being stoned herself because they couldn't figure out the origin of her pregnancy? Or, if that's too complicated, do we wonder if some of those Pharisees, some of those lawmakers, walked away clutching their stones? Were they able to drop the stones and therefore drop their rigid perception of the way God would act? Or did they allow this experience to work in their minds and hearts to say, hey, this is not the image of God that I previously had. And I need to ponder that. I need to allow myself, gosh, it was surprising the way Jesus responded. How often in our lives do we allow ourselves to be surprised by God? Does God always conform to the way we think God should behave? I can tell you now, that's not going to happen. And God might push the boundaries on those perceptions and understandings, assumptions, just to teach us that that's not the way God will not be bound by our smallness. God is this immensely generous creation, being, and if anything, God is going to use our lifetime to teach us that. Think more broadly of me. Allow me to move in your heart in amazing ways so that you can project that kind of image to the world. So open your eyes today, and I pray that mine are open. How will God surprise us? Because you can bet that God is a nonconformist. Do not peg God into a tight little box, because that's not the way the divine loves. Ponder this story, ponder your life, and be open to the amazing generosity that lies there waiting for you, actively trying to express and expand your understanding of the divine.